Good afternoon and welcome back to Chambers Wales Business Bites. This week, I'd like to welcome Nadine Haschka, an insurance expert from credit insurer Atradius. So, as a customer service manager, Nadine, you've been speaking to customers day in and day out throughout the pandemic. What's it been like?
Well, it's been different, that's for sure. I think it's fair to say there's been a lot of concern from businesses. Of course there has. 2020 was a shock for us all, and many of our customers made the switch, as we did, from working at the office to working from the kitchen table. And online meetings have occasionally been made more interesting by pop-up children and dogs. I've even seen a bunny rabbit determined to get his moment of fame. So somehow this has created a new and different sense of camaraderie, if anything, a sense of we're all in this together despite all the uncertainty around us. At Atradius, we very much saw our role as one of reassurance and support, while at the same time looking for the very best way to buffer businesses from the crisis. So that has meant, on one hand, not taking any knee-jerk reactions, while on the other, being flexible enough to adapt to the risks ahead, whatever they might be. Putting your head in the sand and hoping this would all go away was never going to be the answer. So regularly talking to businesses has been more important than ever during this time.
And how do you think businesses are feeling now 1 year on?
It's almost hard to believe this has been going on for over a year now, isn't it? We're seeing a mixture of feelings, I'd say. Caution, absolutely. But also now a sense of hope and an enthusiasm to upscale business operations, which is exciting. Like so many of us, most customers understand that there's absolutely no point waiting for normality to return. It's simply been too long now to just stand still and wait. The ability to evolve and be agile to changing circumstances is now the name of the game. And that can mean different things to different businesses. For some, it's about seizing new opportunities, upscaling certain operations, or seeking new suppliers or customers. While for others, it might be expanding into new markets, for instance, or implementing the most robust risk management strategies to future-proof themselves against what could happen next.
So doing business in 2021 is going to be much more different than anybody thought imaginable. How different do you think it's going to be?
Very different. COVID-19 has rocked global markets to the core in what we can only describe as the most uncertain time in modern history. It is undeniable that businesses have struggled. We've experienced a global emergency with the onslaught of this pandemic, while economic consequences were perhaps inevitable as governments tried to mitigate and suppress the virus. We've seen businesses repeatedly shut down with restraints on trading, on travel, on social interaction, and even on leaving home. So it was no surprise that this led the UK economy into a recession. And in fact, recession has been seen in almost every economy around the world, with global GDP contracting 3.7% last year, and UK GDP contracting as much as 9.9%. So the landscape is indeed very different to navigate.
And what's been the ensuing impact on businesses? Have we seen a rise in insolvencies?
Well, the path of insolvencies has certainly been very interesting. Effectively, we've experienced a perfect storm designed to create an explosion of insolvencies. And it seemed almost inevitable that 2020 would see massive business failures like never before. We just have to look back to the 2008-2009 global recession to know this. However, the insolvency scenario was so inevitable that preventative measures were taken. This includes fiscal support from government, supporting companies whose revenue was impacted by COVID, along with changes to insolvency regimes, which stop businesses from falling into insolvencies.
And has this support worked in preventing insolvencies?
Well, to an extent, yes, but the issue is actually far more complicated. It's clear that the widely anticipated rise in insolvencies did not happen in 2020. In fact, our economic research at Atradius estimates global insolvencies actually declined by an average of 14% in 2020. The insolvency rate varies across the world, but here in the UK, insolvencies dropped by as much as 27% last year.
I mean, a drop in insolvencies during a global recession, it seems too good to be true, right?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, it is too good to be true. As the measures that kept the insolvencies unusually low last year get phased out, the level of failures are expected to rise by the end of 2021. Atradius economists forecast global insolvencies will rise 26% this year, with UK insolvencies forecast to increase by a hugely significant 56%. And let's not forget that in many markets, the insolvency process itself has been halted. So there will be a number of so-called zombie companies out there which will inevitably fall once the wheels are back in motion. For others, they may have started 2020 in good health, but have been hit by 14 months and counting of successive closures and shifts in demand, which is extremely difficult to sustain. So as the economy reopens, some businesses will start trading again, but trading on an empty bank account and one which is unlikely to be replenished in the short term. So while the support measures were absolutely needed, to an extent you could say that they've kicked some of the problems further down the road, and those problems will still need to be dealt with. They haven't just gone away.
So given the pandemic, what are the additional risks that businesses are facing right now?
Well, for the reasons we've just discussed, businesses really need to be switched on to the very real risk of insolvency and subsequent non-payment. Insolvencies can affect any business, large or small, new or well-established, and it's not just being cautious about your own customers. Insolvencies can have a domino effect with an impact rippling along the supply chain. So you not only need to be reviewing your customers' ability to pay, but the financial health of your customers' customers and their customers too. Are they taking the necessary precautions to protect their business and their cash flow? It's also important that businesses are not so keen to restart and boost trade that they make simple mistakes. Now is the time to increase your due diligence, I'd say, not a time to let your guard down.
So what are those early warning signs that businesses need to be looking out for?
Well, I can give you quite a list. Firstly, changes in payment behavior, whether that's late payments, unpaid bills, if your customers changed their bank or offered bills of exchange in lieu of payment. These could all be signs that they are struggling with cash flow. Then changing orders. A business which is firefighting will often trade less strategically. So keep an eye on any overtrading with lower profit margins or permanent use of full credit lines, and also smaller, more frequent orders, which may suggest they can't afford to meet their usual demand and are exhausting all lines of credit as times get tougher. Then, of course, there's disputes. Invoice disputes can be used as a tactic to buy more time to pay. Similarly, any drop in communication could signal customers are avoiding you. And this in many ways is much easier to do when offices are closed. So always make sure you are getting the answers you need. Renegotiation, then, I'd say, is another sign to look out for. Has your customer started asking for price reductions or variations to your agreement, perhaps? And rather than holding firm here, though, it may make more sense to work with your customers by increasing lines that are selling stronger at this time, or even reclaiming stock which they've been unable to shift. Lastly, then, I'd have to say be prepared. While many insolvencies show warning signs beforehand, there are many others that are a complete bolt out of the blue. And in today's climate, unpredictability is the name of the game, making the risk of insolvencies even more acute. And nobody's immune. You may feel reassured by the fact that you have a long-standing relationship with your customer, which has stood the test of time. But this is not going to be enough to protect you should something go wrong. That was quite a list, right? So if anyone would like help tracking the early warning signs I've just mentioned, We have free downloadable information on the publications page of the atradius.co.uk website. Essentially, there's a tick list for the early detection of default risks. It's designed to walk businesses through the early warning signs, so please feel free to download it. It could really help.
Fantastic. So if businesses are tuned into these early warning signs, what else can they do to protect themselves?
Well, there's always more that can be done. Some might choose to trade in cash, perhaps, or something we would certainly recommend would be to include a retention of title clause in your terms and conditions, so you retain ownership of your goods until payment is made. This gives you the right to reclaim any unused goods from your debtor's administrator if indeed the worst happens. I'd also say if you do run into problems with late payments, don't delay in taking action. From sending reminders to final warning letters to turning the debt over to a collection agency who can help you find amicable, workable solutions. Just don't delay. At the end of the day, it all comes down to making sure your risk management strategy is absolutely robust. Businesses simply cannot afford to stand still or be crippled by the risk of insolvency. A robust trading strategy will help a business mitigate the risk and trade safely. So protect yourself by doing a comprehensive assessment and build up solid knowledge of your customers and the wider market. And don't cut corners. If cash is king, as they say, then business intelligence is surely queen. They come as a pair. So in an environment which is constantly changing, live information on payment practices and customer behavior is critical in order to spot any warning signs that something might be wrong. The key words here being live information. In a fast-moving environment, information quickly becomes dated and irrelevant, with traditional credit checks often becoming fruitless. Real-time monitoring is crucial to making reliable credit decisions. And if you don't have the resources to do this in-house, outsource it. When you consider that Atradius has a team of global experts on the ground around the world, constantly monitoring payment practices and market trends, that's how big a job it is, and its importance cannot be overestimated. And one more thing, to protect themselves, I'd say design a new framework to help assess and forecast the financial future. This is really important to identify any potential problems and ensure adequate cash flow.
So on that last point that you just mentioned, how do you go about doing this?
Well, I'd recommend conducting very regular assessments of liquidity risk, calculated using rigorous analytics, so modelling cash flow, profit and loss, and balance sheets in different scenarios, which are tailored to the current financial circumstances. These would need to take into account customers' credit risk during the outbreak, with red flags where there have been any payment issues. Of course, the knock-on impact from your customers' customers will need to form part of the assessment too, particularly where businesses in the supply chain have been shut down, for example. So a comprehensive assessment of liquidity issues in each scenario, graded for severity, will help you maintain control and manage future uncertainty. And once you're armed with these insights you've created, you'll be better placed to mitigate risk by reducing the impact of potential cash flow issues upon your liquidity. So courses of action may include optimizing your accounts payable and accounts receivables, as well as reducing costs, for example. And with a pressing need to bolster cash flow, accounts receivables is fast becoming the biggest asset to businesses at this time. Conversely, this is also one of the more challenging areas for organizations, as they have very little control over their customers' payment practices.
So with such a difficult trading environment ahead, how do businesses not become overwhelmed?
Well, there is certainly a lot to digest. I totally get that. However, it's important to remember that risk is an inherent part of trade and always has been. Our view at Atradius is that the pandemic is simply another risk to manage, and it's how you respond to that risk that will define you. Being flexible Adapting to the new risks and taking a hard line on risk mitigation will make the difference between just surviving and thriving. And one good thing to have arisen from this time is an enhanced awareness of risk management. Increasingly, businesses are taking much more robust steps to protect themselves from non-payment and are evolving their trade strategies to suit. This will ensure they are better protected now, as well as future-proofing them for the long term, and that's definitely a good thing.
Absolutely. So any final words of advice to businesses who are listening today?
Well, firstly, I'd say remember that you're not alone. Learn from your mistakes, share best practices, and seek the support which is on hand. Of course, I'm going to say consider speaking to a business partner like Atradius. I'd be in trouble if I didn't, right? As a trade credit insurer, we pay out claims in the event of non-payment, so protecting businesses from the impact of insolvencies and helping our customers sleep at night. However, we also offer much more. We work with customers to mitigate risk and also to identify new markets and new customers and to seize the real opportunities out there for growth. Credit insurance is no longer an add-on product. Our journey with customers starts right at the beginning of a trade journey, and we work in partnership to develop trade strategies that stand the test of time, no matter what lies on the path ahead. Credit insurers are an unrivaled source of information with comprehensive, real-time data and insights into global markets, sectors, and individual buyers to assess and mitigate risks effectively. And by equipping customers with the right tools, knowledge, and advice, we can enable them to make the right decisions for their business and be prepared to navigate through these uncertain times. So absolutely consider getting credit insurance.
Nadine, thank you so much for your analysis and recommendations. I do have one final question that has been submitted. So you've worked in customer service for more than 20 years. How important is customer service for businesses?
Well, I firmly believe that high quality customer service makes all the difference. It makes you stand out from the crowd, and it shows you really care about what you do. In these uncertain times, we've heard so much about COVID having accelerated trends in digitalization, automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. For me, though, I believe it's hugely important that every time you improve your artificial intelligence, you elevate your human intelligence too. It's like two sides of the same coin. When our relationship with our customers is primarily conducted online, then every human interaction becomes even more important, especially when they're less frequent. Your customer's perception of your business matters. It impacts the price they're willing to pay and how they talk to others about you. And in these strange and uncertain times, it's ever more important to create a positive impression. So always work on your customer service too.
Nadine, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. If anybody watching would like to seek more personal advice or any information from Atradius, or has any further questions, please do visit the Atradius website or get in touch with the Chamber for a personal introduction. So thank you so much again for joining us this afternoon, and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.